I'm very happy to welcome in studio Jeanne, who has started a website called mycareoptions.ie. It was born out of her own personal experience when she became the main carer for her mother after her mother survived a severe stroke in 2003. A short time later, Jeanne's son was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Jeanne is a full-time carer. The site mycareoptions.ie acts as a forum for those who are carers to talk about the highs and the lows they face every day and to offer a support community. Jeanne joins me this morning. Jeanne, good morning. How are you today?
Hi, Tom.
I was just saying to you there before when the news was on, sometimes in life you don't really know what's coming down the road towards you.
You certainly don't. 8.5 years ago, I was happily running my graphic design company, and my mum was looking after my 18-month-old son part-time, just in the morning. So I had a lovely balance of work and family life, and having a lot of time with my son. And one day I went over to pick him up at lunchtime, and we'd actually decided to spend the afternoon together. I was going to bring my mum over to see one of her friends, and we were leaving the house, and I was standing watching her lock the door as we were about to get into the car, and suddenly everything seemed to go into slow motion for her, and she was chatting away, and she sounded as if she'd had several large brandies.
Really?
And I said, "What's up, Mum?" And she didn't know there was something different. So I got her into the house, and I could feel her legs getting weak, and she slumped down on the sofa, and I knew straight away what it was, and I rang an ambulance. So luckily I was there.
You knew it was a stroke?
I knew it was a stroke. You know, I'd obviously heard about stroke, and I just knew it was a stroke. And I was very lucky I was there, and she wasn't alone. She wasn't alone with my son. So the ambulance came, and that was really the beginning, I suppose, of a huge change in life for her, and a huge change in focus for me.
When you got her into hospital, was it long before you realised the extent of what had happened to her?
Well, I suppose it was before the seriousness of it. It was, you know, between the time, you know, that she seemed to be running around looking after her grandson very ably, very active 70-year-old, just come back from an adventure in Egypt with a friend, and then overnight she seemed to be sitting in a wheelchair, unable to move her left side at all. She completely lost her left side, completely paralysed down her left side. Her speech was indistinct. Her speech was strange, and she was sitting there dribbling, and it was horrifying, and obviously completely traumatised because her mind wasn't affected at all.
Right. Was she able to communicate with you?
She was. Her speech, you know, over the months her speech came back to pretty much normal, but she never regained any movement. And
Did you have hope at that point? Because sometimes people can say this might be a week, it might be 2 weeks.
Of course I did, and I was, you know, and I was frantic to talk to anybody who had a relative have a stroke. And of course I got talking to a few people, and people were putting me in touch with people, and everybody was terribly positive and said, "Oh, it looks dreadful at the beginning, but, you know, my aunt or whatever, in a few months' time, she was back walking, or, you know, it's very slow, but she'll get there, it'll be fine." And, of course, the doctors were non-committal, and, you know, as the weeks went by, we sort of started getting excited because at one point she was able to move a toe, but it really didn't come back. So the next year was spent.
There's a point in that, isn't there, when the hospital will kind of sit you down and say, "This is the new base level. This is where she is now."
Well, I never got that in a particularly kind way, unfortunately. I mean, I know they deal with this all the time. I know probably within about, maybe in month 2, one of the consultants said, you know, well, she's really just going to have to get used to a more sedentary life. And I thought, you know, well, what does that actually mean?
It's hardly just sedentary. That sounds like she's going to be watching a lot of television.
Well, yeah, it's terribly boring. It's terribly boring for her. So really, it was completely unknown, and I felt very, very lost.
The shock for you from going from your business, the young 18-month-old baby, boy or girl?
Boy.
To see your mother in this state, distressed and worried and fearful, and turning to you as well, it's a lot to get your head around.
It was, and she'd always been the person looking after me, the strong one, and always my rock. And then suddenly everything was turned around, and she was sort of looking at me saying, what's going to happen? You know, you're not going to leave me here. And everything was in my hands. I don't have any brothers and sisters. My father has never really been around. So it was all, I felt it very much on my shoulders to make a plan and to make it work and to do what she wanted.
And she was a year in the hospital, was she?
She spent a whole year in the hospital.
A year. When you think about it, you know, it's a long time.
It was a very severe stroke. They called it a dense stroke, and they said she was lucky to survive. She probably has a different view on that, but it was very severe, and so it was a whole year. And in that year, trying to balance some family life, seeing her every day, trying to keep running my business at that particular time, and organise the conversion of her house so she would be able to move back in. It was, I can't actually remember much of that year.
I can imagine, but I can imagine also that must have been worth gold to your mum to know that she was going to leave the hospital and get back to her own house, because your own house means everything to you.
It means everything. Now I mean, I kept saying that to her, but actually in my heart I didn't know that this road that I was going down, that she wanted to get back to her home. I actually didn't know whether it was going to be possible in the end, because I didn't know how well she was going to get. But she did, and we got her home, and it was a huge sense of satisfaction to see her in her own home, you know, with her at that stage. Then I had another boy, we had
adopted.
We had brought back a little boy from Guatemala, so had two small children, and I had managed to find somebody to care for her at night, and moved in.
Did she need care during the day? What level of care did she need when she came back?
She really didn't. She couldn't really be left on her own for very long. I mean, I might have left her for 15 minutes, but she needed somebody around all the time, because she couldn't do anything for herself.
Right, she couldn't feed herself.
Well, she could feed herself. You know, she had one side that was working, so she could feed herself if you chopped up her food. She can brush her hair. She was always a painter and a reader, so she was still able to do that to an extent. But she was having difficulty with her eyesight as well. It affected her eyesight a bit as well.
But in terms of getting into bed or
no. I mean, you know, no. That was very much, you know, a lot of physical work and a lot of physical help to get her out of a chair into a wheelchair, and it was very physically demanding as well as mentally wearing as well. To do all
I can imagine, and distressing for both of you, because it's a situation with your mum you don't ever really want to be in.
You certainly don't, and I think I was very much aware of how my mood would affect her. And I mean, there were a few crisis points. There was one particular time I remember when I had been looking after her all morning. I'd been there with the baby. This was later on when we had another baby, and the two boys were in school, and I'd been looking after her all morning, and the boys came home from school, and I was unwell at the time. I think I had a flu bug or something like this. I probably should have been in bed, and my defences were low, and so the boys came in, and I started doing some homework. And you can imagine what that's like, because literally we were in one room together. So I had two boys, one with Asperger's syndrome and ADD, trying to do homework, a baby, you know, crawling around on the floor making noise, and a mum needing stuff. And I remember in the middle of it all, she said, you know, I need to go to the loo.
Yeah.
And you know, you couldn't really hang around when my mum said she needed to go to the loo, because when she needed to go, she needed to go. So I said, okay, well, we'll stop the homework for a moment. And the baby began to cry, and I said, no, listen, you know, and I got her into her wheelchair, avoided running over the baby, got her to the bathroom, but not in time. And I think it was a combination just of everything, and I just got very upset, and I got angry. And the awful thing was that she got upset, and she said to me, Jean, she was crying. She said, I wish I could help you. I wish I could help you. And I said, well, there's nothing you can do. I said, it would be better if I wasn't here. And I said, well, you go on like that, Mum, I'll help you on your way. But we had a hug.
You didn't.
We had a hug
You didn't
and
say
a
that to
kiss.
your
I
mum.
did. She knows what I'm like.
I'm glad.
But we had a hug and a kiss, and we laughed, and that was it. And 5 minutes later, it was okay, and we went on. But there were low points like that. But from that point on, I said, I am not going to lose my control about it, because it affects other people too much. But the problem with that is you go around, you're forced into a position of going around with a smile on your face, seemingly from everybody's point of view, being very capable and strong and dealing with this only because you have to. And inside you're falling apart.
How many years, I mean, when she arrived home and you start to get used to this new reality with your mum, how many years of having to cope with that level of stress and young children and that?
Well, she was at home for 5 years, and I had various carers living in and doing the night part, and then doing when I couldn't be there. But I was there. I was her main carer, and of course we had help from the Carers Association as well. 4 hours a week, which was invaluable.
4 hours a week doesn't sound like very much.
Well, it is actually when you really need it.
Yeah.
And it just went on like that. So we survived, and then it really got.
How did it affect just the rest of your life, like your work? How did that?
Well, I had to give up my job. I had to. And there wasn't really a choice in it. I couldn't do both.
Yeah.
When it, and to say, okay, well, my job now is going to be the children and my mother, and I just had to change focus. I found it very, very difficult. I really did, because my work was my life. You don't even mention your husband in there. How was he? My long-suffering husband. Well, obviously, I was able to give up my work because he was the main bread earner anyway.
Yeah.
And he was able to keep us afloat. So in terms of support, I mean, it was very much financial support from him. And and that was great.
It must have been tough for him as well, because
it was very tough.
You'd be coming home to a house where you must be getting little enough attention.
Well, this is it, and I think a lot of people find it very difficult living, with somebody who is caring for somebody else, because obviously there's a complete change in focus, and other people are going to come before you. Yeah. So I know it was very difficult for him, and he probably didn't fully understand the extent of what I was doing, and the world that I was living in, because he was quite entrenched in his own work, and
hard for him as well. To know if you work can bring its own pressures and its own things, and then when coming home to that house, you have to leave that at the door step. It's
true, and I mean communication can break down terribly there.
Well, I can imagine it's a relationship under great strain.
Absolutely,
no question about it.
Huge.
5 years with your mum like that in the house. Are there good times and bad times with her?
Oh yeah, I mean it's very much up and down, and taking each day as it comes. And I mean, as I've said, I mean we've had some very low days, but there were great days as well. And to be able to have the children there, and they could sit on her lap and she could read a bit to them or something like this, and we did go out together, all of the kids and things like this. But when I had a small baby as well, it was very confined, because I couldn't manage the two smaller boys and the baby and the wheelchair as well. So unless I had help, I couldn't.
How were you? How were you in all this? I mean, I know the website is launched very much to try and help and support people, but what support were you getting, and how did you feel during it? You must be going crazy.
I think I probably put my feelings away for a lot of it, because I needed to get on and get stuff done, and I probably only realised when it came to the point where it got too difficult, and was
it getting more progressive with her? Was it?
Well, the fact that she was getting older, as well. I mean, she was 70 when it happened. She was about to have her 71st birthday, and the fact that she was actually getting older, and she wasn't really gaining any of her, her movement. It became more difficult, and she became more immobile, and I probably was getting weaker as well. Yes, it got more difficult, and it got to the point where really I couldn't feel that I could manage it anymore, and she needed to be in a safer environment. I mean, I think I only ever dropped her once, and I didn't break her. Thank goodness. She always used to say to me, Jeanne, I would prefer to go to this place, or I'd prefer to do this and take the risk of dropping me, and obviously it was a risk to me as well, and we took some awful risks, but she said, I prefer it. If you drop me, I forgive you.
I want to live a little.
Live a little.
Time I have.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you make the decision? She's gone in somewhere now?
She's in Our Lady's Hospice, which is fantastic in long-term care in Our Lady's. Which, I mean, if they're fantastic there. If I live 20 miles away, it would be wonderful if she was there. But I only live, 12 minutes push with her wheelchair.
Really, it's fantastic.
So it's fantastic.
But was it hard to have that discussion for her to say, I'm going to go here, or for you to say, you're going to head it?
It was very difficult, and of course, I mean, she didn't want to leave her home.
No.
But she knew herself that it had come to that time where it would be better for everybody.
It must have been a tough day, though.
It was a very tough day, and I mean, for me as well, I had a miscarriage. In fact, I moved her into Our Lady's the day after I had a miscarriage. It was an unplanned pregnancy, so I was at a very, very, very low ebb, and it was just at the right time. And I remember, coming away from leaving her there, and it was a real, it was a moment of change. But I felt, okay, well, now this is a different chapter, a different chapter. So we move on from here. And I see her every day, practically every day.
How is she?
And she's fine. She's relatively good. Unfortunately, she's developed Parkinson's now. Hopefully, it's not going to develop too much, but life is very
tough,
cruel.
isn't it? It's a litany
life is very
of blows. And when you think back to 2002, it was when she was fine and healthy and brilliant and looking after your young baby. It's a shocking road to find yourself on.
It really is. It really is.
A lot of people listening to this, sadly, have similar experiences, and
a lot worse.
Absolutely. And a word you used in an article I was reading about it was being overwhelmed, and it can be very overwhelming on so many levels, emotionally and physically.
Emotionally and physically, and the huge amount that there is to do, and the responsibility, of caring for somebody else, that everything is totally in your hands.
So what's the website? Well, it strikes me as a place, and it's a thing that comes up very often on the show, is that it's an enormous value and benefit to talk to people who are having similar experiences to you.
This is it. I think, I mean, the reason why I set it up, the main reasons where I really felt that I was in need was communication and support, extra help. I needed extra help, and access to relevant information. And communication, you're very, very lucky if you have a friend or a relative or a partner that you can actually talk to, that will understand and listen to you. And a lot of people don't. And I think even, if you've got friends, I mean, I found personally, if I got the opportunity to go out with my friends, I didn't really want to go on about my mum all the time. I didn't want to burden them, and they weren't really going to understand anyway unless they'd been through it. And the other thing is as well, when you get a chance to do something else, you sometimes want to leave your caring behind you and get a break, and talk about other stuff. So that, you can get very stuck with your problems and your decision making, and the need to really talk to somebody who can be on your level and understand what you're feeling inside can be really important.
Is the story you told about the child on the ground and your mum needing to go to the toilet, there'll be incidents like that happening to people everywhere, and different things. Sometimes different things are what can push you very close to the edge for you. And to be able to go online and just tell somebody that who's in a similar position, It's worth its weight in gold, isn't it?
Well, I just, you can feel as if you're in a very black hole, deep black hole, and that you're never going to get out. And to be able to discuss it and get something coming back, or even the very fact of, writing down your feelings. I often feel that writing down how I feel clarifies things for me, and I can understand better, what I'm feeling, and to move on.
Yeah. So it's up and running. It's called mycareoptions.ie, isn't it?
It's called mycareoptions.ie. Yeah, and I think I've tried to sort of cover as many areas as I can.
So what help is available?
Yeah, what help is available?
What you can do.
I mean, I found that. I sometimes when I needed help very, very urgently. And there was one particular occasion when I got up one morning and I had a phone call, and it was my carer who was living with my mum. She was on a bus, and she said, "I'm on the bus, I've left your mum in a chair, I've got a new job, I won't be back." And suddenly I had no help. Wow. and I urgently had to find help, and that was a disaster. It was a disaster. My mum had to end up in emergency respite that particular time.
They're all these things are happening on a fairly regular basis. There's always a crisis to deal with, isn't there, in that kind of situation?
Always something to deal with, and always
Are services in Ireland, how would you rate them?
Well, I found I was completely lost. I mean, I found from at the starting point, the social worker in the hospital was relatively helpful. Yeah. I'd say relatively helpful. Later on, when she came home, the Carers Association was very helpful, and gave great support. But as you say, it was limited to a certain extent in terms of physical.
You could have used a lot more.
And then. Really, I just had to find my way and learn as I went along, and I mean that's the thing.
Is it better abroad? Do you know?
I really don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. But in terms of support and just emotional support, probably people feel the same way all over the world, I'm sure.
Exactly. And that's having somebody you can turn to and talk to who knows what it is. Jeanne, thanks very much for that this morning.
Pleasure.
Lovely talking to you.
Pleasure.
That website is mycareoptions.ie, and if you have anything you'd like to share with us this morning, 53106, the text number, you can give us a call, 1890 453 106.